Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our Benny's Bat section for Friday, May 6th. It's a pretty big 14-game slate we have for tonight. There's 15 games today with one game starting before 7. So we're going to concentrate on the 14 games for the late slate. The idea of the Benny's Bat section here is we try to take a look at every pitcher that's on the mound, figure out what their weaknesses are, and then figure out which bats profile to do the best against them. So we got a lot of information to talk about today, and let's get started right at the top. The first game we're going to talk about, Boston Red Sox going up against the New York Yankees. Rick Porcello's on the mound for Boston, and he's honestly been really good in 2016. The Yankees as a team have struggled to hit the ball against right and left-handed pitching, so I think this could be a pretty good spot here for Porcello. The only guy that really stands out on the numbers for me is Mark Teixeira at 385 WOBA, 310 ISO since the beginning of 2015, but he hasn't really been on fire to start this year. He's probably the best bat that the Yankees have. Remember, A-Rod is on the DL. You also have Brett Gardner, who got hit in the face with a pitch 2 days ago, who might not be in the lineup as well. So that's 2 of the top 5 or 6 hitters in the lineup that are going to be out there. You know, Beltran is okay. You got Ellsbury as a left-hander who could be okay. But I really don't see the Yankees putting up a lot of runs in this one. Like I said, the offense isn't good, and they got a couple guys hurt. So I think it's actually a better spot for Porcello than it is for any of the Yankee bats. On the other side of the game, we got Michael Pineda pitching. Left-handed bats have hit him for a higher average, although right-handed bats have actually been the ones that have been taking them deep a little bit more often. I do like some of the lefties here for Boston. David Ortiz, 420 WOBA, 326 ISO. Definitely think he's going to be a viable option today. Also, Travis Shaw, the third baseman, who's been playing really well to start the year. 361 WOBA, 198 ISO for him. I think he's somebody else that I'd look at. The game is in Yankee Stadium if the weather holds off. It is raining in the New York area right now. Supposedly, we're going to get rain here in the New York area all day, so I'm not sure if this game's even going to go off. But I think looking at the left-handed bats against the righty in Yankee Stadium is probably the way you want to attack Pineda here today. So, like I said, guys like Ortiz and Shaw definitely in play. You know, Pedroia's been hitting the ball pretty well. Mookie Betts is always a solid option too. But Ortiz and Shaw are the 2 that I'm really looking at. Next game we can talk about, we got Oakland going up against Baltimore at Baltimore. Rich Hill's on the mound for Oakland, a lefty. Right-handed bats have been better against him, but honestly, he's been really good to start the year here too. High strikeout numbers. He's been K-ing a lot of guys. Might even be a viable option against an Orioles team that does hit the ball pretty well, but at the same point in time, they do strike out a lot too. They do have a lot of big right-handed bats, though, which kind of scares me a little. A guy like Trumbo, I think, is in a great spot today. 372 WOBA, 280 ISO score against left-handed pitching. He should be somebody that, you take a long look at. Maybe even Joey Ricard leading off for them. He's been hitting left-handed pitching well. The, little righty who's been leading off for them. So he's somebody else you can look at. Machado's actually better in righty-on-righty matchups, but he can hit left-handed pitching too. And then even a guy like Chris Davis, who has a lot of power. I don't see him doing well against Hill, but Hill, because of his high strikeout numbers, doesn't tend to go deep in the game. So he's usually going to be out of there by the 7th inning. And you may get an at-bat or 2 for Davis against the right-handed relief pitcher, which would be a better spot for him. I don't really think you can bank on that as a guy that you want to put into your cash game lineups. But if you want to include him in the GPP, I'm not really going to argue. But again, I don't really love these Baltimore bats here because Hill has been good to start the season. On the other side of this game, you got Ubaldo Jimenez. Now, Jimenez is really good at home, so the fact that this game is in Baltimore is probably something that's pretty solid for him. And he's kind of a reverse splits guy, so right-handed bats tend to do better against him. He's actually been pretty solid against lefties. This Oakland lineup is filled with lefties, so there really aren't too many guys righty on righty with the reverse splits that I think you can look at. One guy that definitely stands out and somebody I think is a great play today is Chris Davis. Chris Davis with a K for Oakland. He's going to be their cleanup hitter usually. Righty on righty, he hits very well. 357 WOBA, 259 ISO. Like I said, he's going to be in a cleanup spot for them. He's probably my favorite bat in this entire game and definitely somebody I'm going to have exposure to, both in cash and GPPs against Ubaldo. Next game we can talk about the LA Dodgers going up against the Toronto Blue Jays up in Toronto. We got Marcus Stroman on the mound for Toronto, and Stroman's been another one of these guys. He's been really solid here to start the year. A couple guys who I think you can look at against them. Justin Turner, righty-on-righty situations, has been a pretty good hitter since the beginning of 2015. 372 WOBA, 192 ISO. You can look at a guy like Seager, although he's really, cooled off since the hot start from the beginning of the year. Adrian Gonzalez always in play, especially in Toronto, which is a good place for power. 356 WOBA, 216 ISO score for him. He does have some power, left-handed bat. Hitting up in Toronto, I think he's in a pretty good spot here as well. On the other side of the game, we have Kenta Maeda, the Japanese pitcher who came over, and he's been amazing to start the year. 141 ERA, 0.94 whip, 28 strikeouts in 32 innings, and he's just been straight shutting people down. I mean, he went into Coors Field in Colorado and threw like a one-run game through 6 or 7 innings with, 5 or 6 strikeouts. That's really tough to do for anybody. I mean, we usually don't target any pitchers at all, even in Colorado, but he's been pretty good. This Toronto offense has actually been struggling against right-handed pitching to start the year here. Guys like Encarnacion and Batista and Donaldson, they all have pretty good numbers if you look back to last year, but this year those numbers are all down a little bit. I think you want to look at the left-handed bats here, but again, Maeda's been pretty good, so I don't really want to go heavy on this game. But guys like Michael Saunders make a little bit of sense to me. Justin Smoke, where he's still cheap, he's been hitting really well. They moved him up into the 5-hole right now, so he's hitting basically behind the big 3 in Donaldson, Batista, and Encarnacion. I'm not playing Troy Tulowitzki. I haven't played him basically all season. I'm not going to start now, and definitely not in this matchup here today. So, Toronto had a big game yesterday. They kind of broke out of the slump that everybody has been waiting for them to break out of, but not really looking for them to have a ton of upside here today. Next game we can talk about, we got Kansas City going up against the Cleveland Indians. Yordano Ventura on the mound for Kansas City, and left-handed bats have done better against him. The one guy who really kind of stands out to me is Jason Kipnis, 386 WOBA, 166 ISO against right-handed pitching since the beginning of 2015. Probably the best left-handed bat they do have on that Cleveland Indians team. I know people are going to mention Michael Brantley as well, but he came back from injury about 2 weeks ago and really hasn't been hitting all that well lately. So, yeah, if you look at the numbers, he is kind of a standout on the numbers against right-handed pitching. But I need to see him actually look like the old Michael Brantley before I start rolling him out and paying for him. And I just don't think that he's there yet. If you need a shortstop option, Francisco Lindor hitting in the 3-hole is an okay one. But really, Kipnis is about the only guy that I'm really looking at against Ventura here today. On the other side, we got another solid pitcher in Danny Salazar. Left-handed bats have done a little bit better against him. So there's 2 guys that are kind of standing out. Eric Hosmer, 383 WOBA, 184 ISO. He's somebody that I'd look at. Mike Moustakas, the 2-hitter in that lineup, 353 WOBA, 194 ISO. Another guy that has done well against right-handed pitching. So again, I'm not looking for a ton of runs to come out of this game. We got a lot of good pitchers on the mound. There are a few gas cans. Neither one of these guys are gas cans. So, I guess you can look at a couple bats against them, but I wouldn't really be looking to go heavy against either one of these 2 teams. Now, the next game, I think there are a lot of bats we can look at. You got Milwaukee going up against Cincinnati at Cincinnati, good home run hitters ballpark, a little bit of a bandbox there, the Great American Ballpark. Tyler Cravey, the right-hander, is pitching for Milwaukee. He's basically a reliever that's being stretched out, so I'm not expecting to see him for more than maybe 5 innings. I think this is going to be one of those games that turns into a little bit of a bullpen game. This Cincinnati offense absolutely exploded yesterday while everybody was on Milwaukee on the other side of it. Put up like 7 runs in the first 3 or 4 innings and, had a pretty solid day. Joey Votto, obviously the best hitter on the Cincinnati team, 408 WOBA, 224 ISO against right-handed pitching. Definitely think he's in play. But I don't think Cravey's very good, and I don't think this bullpen's very good. So I think you can kind of look at everybody here. Guys like Cozart has been leading off. A guy like Jay Bruce, who's pretty much a boomer bust kind of guy, hitting in the 5-hole. A lot of power there in Cincinnati. I think it's a good ballpark for him. Eugenio Suarez has been playing well. Adam Duvall, maybe even a Billy Hamilton, who they had hitting second in the lineup yesterday. If Hamilton gets on, he's always a threat to steal bases. I actually like it when he's hitting in front of Cozart instead of behind, because Cozart's not a guy who runs a lot, and Hamilton is. So if Cozart's on base and Hamilton gets on, he's kind of being blocked up from doing what you really need him to do, which is steal bases in order to really add some value to his fantasy score. So I'd rather see Hamilton hitting ahead of Cozart, but it is what it is there. I do think Cincinnati's in a pretty decent spot here because they're going to have some bad pitching on the other side, and they're in a good hitter's ballpark. So I wouldn't be shocked to see them put up some points today. On the other side, you have Tim Alderman. This is his 2nd major league start. He pitched against Pittsburgh in his first start, went 6 innings, 3 hits, 2 walks, 2 runs, and 6 strikeouts. So that's a pretty solid beginning to his career. You look at this Milwaukee team, Brian Braun, the only guy who really profiles well in righty-on-righty situations. 368 WOBA, 209 ISO score. But I don't think he's the only guy you can look at. You've been getting a lot of power out of Chris Carter lately, who's been bashing home runs left and right. Jonathan Villar, the shortstop, leading off is not a bad option. Jonathan Lucroy, the catcher, hitting in the cleanup spot, another guy who's a pretty decent option to look at. And then in the 2-hole, we got Alex Presley. Hit the home run yesterday. He's a left-handed bat going up against a right-handed pitcher in a good hitter's ballpark. He was min price yesterday on just about every site. So if he remains at min price and remains in the 2-hole, I think Presley's another guy that we can look at, especially as a cheap salary saver to try to fit in some, higher price pitching, which we'll get to in a minute. And, also be able to get a couple decent bats in there as well. Next game we're going to talk about, we got the Phillies going up against the Marlins. Wei-Yin Chen is pitching for the Marlins, left-handed bat. Right-handed bats have a higher average and more home runs against him. So you really want to look at the right-handed bats. Darren Ruff gets in the lineup. He's somebody with a 445 WOBA, 271 ISO against left-handed pitching since the beginning of 2015. He's usually pretty cheap, first base or outfield eligible, depending on what sites you're on. Definitely think he's somebody I want to give a little bit of a look to. Remember, though, this game is in Miami, not an easy place to hit home runs, not really a great hitter's park. So I would be just a little bit careful if I'm going to use too many bats here. Whoever gets in at catcher for them, I think is a viable option today, whether it's Cameron Rupp or Carlos Ruiz. Both of these guys hit left-handed pitching pretty well. So whichever one of them gets in the lineup, they've been taking turns playing catcher and hitting fifth. So if you're going to get a catcher that's hitting in a pretty decent lineup real estate spot somewhere where they can drive in some runs, against their preferred split, which both of these guys like hitting against left-handed pitching, I think whichever one of the two catchers gets in there is a viable cheap option for you. The only other guy I'd look at, probably Mikhail Franco, 355 WOBA, 258 ISO. And I really feel like he's not playing well right now. So the fact that his numbers are still decent and he's not playing well kind of leads me to believe that there's going to be some upside for him coming up down the stretch. So I don't know if today is going to be that day. But like I said, I do expect more out of him than what he's given us so far. And what he's given us so far hasn't been horrible. So I think there's some upside there. On the other side, we got Vincent Velasquez pitching. And this guy has been great, man. 4-1. ERA of 1.44, whip of 0.89, 39 strikeouts in 31 innings. I don't really want to target a lot of bats against them. If you did want to target bats, you'd probably be looking at some of the left-handers, guys like Dietrich and Bohr and Yelich. Stanton is always in play, even righty on righty, 381 WOBA, 294 ISO. All these guys have over a 355, 360 WOBA with, 200 ISO scores. So, I mean, if you want to attack Velasquez, you can, but this guy's been that good that I don't really know if I want to attack him. Like I said, Miami's not a great hitter's ballpark. I really like what Velasquez has done to this point of the season. Even if you back out that one monster game that he had, his numbers are still pretty solid. So, if you want to do it, go ahead. I don't think that I can. I know that it makes sense with all these left-handed bats, but I'm not going to be stacking anybody up to go against Velasquez today. Next game, we got Texas at Detroit. Jordan Zimmerman is on the mound for Detroit. Left-handed bats have a higher average against him. And I think that makes this a really tough matchup for him here against Texas. You got Rognan Odor, who's been leading off, and he's been hot at second base. Nomar Mazara, 419 WOBA, 192 ISO to start his career against right-handed pitching. Those are some elite numbers. So if he's hitting in the 2-hole, I really like him. Fielder, 370 WOBA, 152 ISO since last year. The home run power hasn't really been there, but he is getting on base and he is getting hits, driving in runs, so he's still doing his job. And then Mitch Moreland, 367 WOBA, 231 ISO. Moreland is more the GPP play for me, the guy that has some power. Fielder's more of the consistent option where, he'll probably going to get you a single or a double and, maybe a walk or two, maybe score a run, maybe drive in a run or two. But I don't really see the huge upside because Fielder hasn't been hitting home runs and, he's a big guy, so it's not like he's going to be stealing bases and getting us points that way. On the other side of this game, we got Cole Hamels as well. Like I said, this is two pitchers, but these two pitchers don't really profile well against the offenses that they're facing. Hamels a lefty, right-handed bats have a higher average, more power against him. And Detroit has a team that can hit left-handed pitching. You got guys like Miguel Cabrera. It's a very right-handed lineup. You got guys like Cabrera, 402 WOBA, 190 ISO. JD and Castellanos both have over 400 WOBAs, 200 ISOs. Even guys like Iglesias, Kinsler, Vmart, like all these guys hit left-handed pitching well. So I'm not sure if I want to stack up bats against Cole Hamels, but I don't think this is an easy spot for Cole Hamels. with all the right-handers that he's going to be facing. So I'm not using Hamels, and I'm probably not going to be going too heavy on these Detroit bats, although I do think a few of them are in decent spots, and I wouldn't be surprised if one or two of these guys takes Hamels deep. I just don't see them putting up like 10 runs against them in this game here. Next game we can talk about, Arizona against Atlanta. So we got Zach Greinke on the mound. It's a great matchup for him, and he's been much better away from home. So the fact that they're in Atlanta and he's on the road, I think is actually something that'll benefit him here today. He's been good versus Atlanta in his career, and I think this should be a pretty good spot for him. So I'm looking for a bounce-back game here today from Greinke. If you don't believe in him and you think he's still going to get lit up even at, away from Arizona, by all means, I guess you could try to stack up some of these Atlanta bats. But, I mean, you tell me who you want to stack up. Freddie Freeman, the biggest left-handed bat they have. But are you really looking to stack up like Adonis Garcia and A.J. Pierzynski and, Daniel Castro? And, I mean, this is just not a very good lineup, Maybe you can look at some of the lefties like Freeman or Markakis, Pierzynski if you're absolutely desperate. But, I'm not really looking to go against Zach Greinke in this spot. I think Greinke should have a good bounce-back game. He's a good, solid right-handed pitcher with strikeout upside going up against an Atlanta team that has one of the lowest batting averages, least amount of runs scored against right-handed pitching. I think this is more a spot for Greinke than it is for any of the Atlanta bats. On the other side of this game, we got Aaron Blair, the big rookie prospect that Atlanta just called up. He's been okay. They're expecting a lot more out of this kid, but he's a rookie. He just came up there. So I don't think he's going to go past 6 innings. I don't think he's really going to shut down the Arizona offense. It's not a very good hitter's park, but righty on righty situations, Goldschmidt, somebody that's still in play. 402 WOBA, 245 ISO score. Definitely think he has a little bit of upside. Peralta, David Peralta, definitely somebody that I like. His price is still pretty cheap. 388 WOBA, 223 ISO, hits right in the middle of that order. So he's somebody else that I think you can look at there. Like I said, not really looking at a ton of these Arizona bats. They got a lot of right-handers. I'd rather see left-handers to go up against Blair. Guys like Drury, guys like Castillo, kind of hit from the wrong side. They're in a bad splits matchup. So on a 14-game slate, I think you could find some softer spots, and I'd probably be looking to go away from basically anybody but maybe Goldie and, Peralta, probably my favorite play of all in that game. Minnesota going up against the Chicago White Sox. We have Ricky Nolesko on the mound, and right and left-handed bats have both hit him pretty well, but the Chicago White Sox offense, not all that spectacular. Jose Abreu, definitely somebody who stands out for me. 376 WOBA, 231 ISO. He's 3 of 8 lifetime against Nolesko with a home run, and he's been hot. He's been hitting pretty well lately. So if you want shares of Abreu, I'm okay with it. After him, though, I mean, where do you really go? Adam Eaton leading off. He's got about a 360 WOBA, so maybe he's in play. Todd Frazier, he hits better against lefties, so righty on righty, not really his forte. Again, I don't really love Nolesko. I don't think he's going to shut anybody down, but I really just can't find bats that stick out to me as, guys that I really need to have on my cash game team here. So other than Abreu and, like I said, maybe Eaton if you're looking for, a guy who could get you a couple hits in a cash game, there's not much here that I'm really getting all that excited about. On the other side of the game, we got Matt Latos. And Latos has been solid to start the year, but he has very low K numbers. The Twins are not a good offense, and they do have a high strikeout percentage, but I don't think all of a sudden Latos is going to wind up with 10 or 11 Ks here. So you're going to have people telling you, oh, Latos is the play. He's going up against a high K Twins team. But Latos only has like 15 strikeouts in 28 innings, so it's not like he's a high K guy. You give me a high K guy going up against a high K team, all right, I understand. I want him. I want exposure to him. I really don't think this is going to be a great spot here for Latos, though. Again, not a ton of bats that you can really say this guy's going to kill him or that guy's going to kill him. Miguel Sano stands out the most on the numbers, 374 WOBA, 229 ISO score. I guess he makes a little bit of sense. He might be in play. Byung-Ho Park, another guy that I think we can look at. He hasn't had a ton of at-bats in the majors, but this guy has a ton of power. 382 ISO, 382 WOBA, 347 ISO. In his limited at-bats. So that's pretty good. Those are some really, really solid numbers that would put him up in elite hitter territory. So he's somebody else that I think could be a little sneaky. If you want to look at guys like Danny Santana for cheap on top of the order, I think he's somebody that's viable. I liked it a lot more when he was shortstop eligible on DraftKings. They actually transferred him over to outfield. I think he was always outfield on FanDuel. So in the outfield at 2,300, he's a viable punt, but if he was shortstop eligible at 2,300, I would love him because we always have trouble filling out the shortstop position. And if I can get a guy that's leading off, probably going to see 4 or 5 at bats, I would take that for 2,300. He really only needs to get you one hit, one stolen base, and score a run, and he's got you 4 times value. So, if he's still that cheap and he was playing shortstop, I'd say, yeah, in the outfield, don't really love it as much. I don't like giving up outfield positions on guys that don't have a lot of upside. We got Seattle going up against Houston in the next game. Taijuan Walker is here. He's actually been a lot better at home, so I'm a little concerned with him on the road. The only thing is left-handed bats have been the way you wanted to go against him. They have a higher average in past seasons. He's usually pretty tough on righty. And Houston as a team is not great against right-handed pitching. They have a lot of right-handed bats towards the top of that lineup. I guess the one guy who stands out the most is probably Kobe Rasmus. Left-handed bat, probably batting cleanup against the righty today. He's had a pretty good start to the season. Jose Altuve, even though he's not known as a guy that smashes righty on righty matchups, he's been absolutely on fire. So I think he's somebody else you have to look at. I think he hit his 8th or 9th home run yesterday. So, you're getting a light hitting second baseman, as most people consider him, who's basically up there in the top 2 or 3 in the league right now for home runs hit so far through the first, month of the season. So I think Altuve definitely somebody we can keep looking at. And then Carlos Correa is actually the guy with the best numbers in righty on righty situations. 365 WOBA, 213 ISO. Again, like I said, he prefers to hit lefties, but he's got the best numbers out of anybody on the team against right-handed pitching. This Houston team does strike out a lot against good right-handers, so Taijuan Walker could have a decent game today. But like I said, I like him a lot more at home. Not really a huge fan of him on the road. Definitely don't like him in a hitter's ballpark like Houston. I think there are better pitchers that you can look at today. On the other side of this game, we got Doug Fister pitching for Houston. Left-handed bats so far in 2016. In 15 innings pitched, they're hitting 299 against them with 5 home runs. So, left-handers definitely the way we want to attack them. We got 3 left-handers on the Seattle team that make a little bit of sense to me. Sean Smith, 352 WOBA, 203 ISO. It's been hitting in the 2-hole lately for them. So if we're going to get Smith hitting in the 2-hole, I think he's somebody that we can look at. Robinson Cano hitting behind them, 373 WOBA, 207 ISO against right-handed pitching. Cano's definitely in play. And then even Kyle Seager is starting to show a little bit of life. He has 4 multi-hit games in his last 6. 6-game hitting streak going on there. On DraftKings, he has 2 20-point games, 2 10-point games, 2 single-digit games in his last 6. So this is a guy that's got some pretty solid consistency and, definitely has a little bit of a chance for upside as well. If you also want to throw Nelson Cruz in there, Cruz is good in righty-on-righty situations, like a 365 WOBA, big ISO over 200, a lot of power out of Cruz. Again, a good home run hitter's ballpark down there in Houston with them being on the road, so he's getting a park bump. I think Cruz could be another guy that you want to throw into your stacks there if you're putting together stacks of Seattle. Next game we can look at, we got Pittsburgh going up against St. Louis. Pretty good pitching matchup here as well. Like I said, there's a lot of good pitching on the mount. You got Francisco Liriano. He dominated the St. Louis team in his first start of the season. Went 6 innings pitched. I think he struck out 10 batters. Don't think he even gave up a run. And St. Louis is not really great against left-handed pitching, or they weren't last year. They're a little bit better this year, and the 2 reasons for it are 2 guys who didn't play a ton last year. Almeida Diaz, who led off for them the last couple games, this guy's hitting over 400 right now. He's absolutely on fire to start the season. If he's leading off right-handed bat against a left-handed pitcher, I think he might be somebody that I'll take a look at. And then another right-handed bat that's been towards the top of the lineup, Stephen Piscotty, 428 WOBA, 222 ISO in limited innings against limited at bats against a left-handed pitcher. He's one of the better right-handed bats they have. It's not going to be easy for some of these lefties like Carpenter, up there at the top of the order. So if you do decide you want to go against Liriano in St. Louis, which is a pitcher's park, which I think is not a smart idea, but if you did decide to do it, I would be looking at some of the right-handed bats and preferably some of the right-handed bats that are cheap. Like I think Piscotty's like 3,500 or something. Almeida Diaz is like right around 3,000 unless they jack them up. I haven't really looked at his price yet today, but those are 2 guys that I think I may want a little bit of exposure to if I'm going to take anybody against Liriano. On the other side of this game, we got Carlos Martinez pitching for St. Louis. 5 starts so far this season. He's averaging about 7 innings pitched, only 2 earned runs and 6 strikeouts. So he's been pretty good too. You look at this Pittsburgh team, they don't really have bats that profile incredibly well against right-handed pitching. They have a whole bunch of guys who are decent in like the 340 to 350 WOBA range with ISOs, a little below 200. There's not guys that really stand out. I guess the biggest standout would be McCutchen. 376 WOBA, 194 ISO since the beginning of 2015. But I mean, even those numbers are not spectacular, huge upside, especially not in a pitcher's park like St. Louis. So I think you can get away with not using too many guys on Pittsburgh. I do like Martinez a little bit for his upside and the fact that he goes deep into games. Think he might be a viable option here today. Tampa Bay going up against the Los Angeles Angels. Again, another good pitcher on the mound. You got Chris Archer. I know he's had a little bit of struggles, but this is a guy that has big K upside, and he's going up against a really bad offense. This Angels offense against right-handed pitching has been horrible to start the year. Their K percentage is not through the roof, but they do strike out a decent amount. Low batting average, low runs scored. Other than Mike Trout and his 413 WOBA with a 299 ISO, they don't have anybody on this team since the beginning of 2015 that has over a 340 WOBA or over an ISO of 188, with the exception of obviously Trout and Pujols, whose WOBA is pretty low, but he does still have like a 225 ISO score. So basically, Pujols is the kind of guy that I call like a 1-for-4 guy. He's either going to go 1-for-4 with a home run, or he's going to go 0-for-4 because, he's not bashing the base hits like he used to. But if you make a mistake, he's still a guy that can make you pay for it. On the other side of this game, it was supposed to be Garrett Richards starting for the Angels, but Richards got scratched. So now they're starting Corey Rasmus, who's basically a relief pitcher, which leads me to believe that this is going to be a bullpen game. And for people who don't understand that, what I basically mean is, Rasmus is a relief pitcher who's being stretched out. Best case scenario, he gives you 5, absolute best case, maybe 6 innings, and then the bullpen comes in. If he gets knocked around early in the 2nd or 3rd inning, there's a good chance he might not even make it to the 5th. So, it's tough for me to really give you guys good guys to target because we don't know who's actually going to be pitching for most of this game. A lot of the relievers on LA are right-handed, so I'm figuring it's going to be right-handed bats all the way. So maybe you want to look at a guy like Corey Dickerson. Again, his batting average, his WOBA are dropping a little bit, but his ISO numbers are staying high even away from Coors Field. So while he's not hitting for a high average, he is still jacking home runs out of the ballpark. Makes a viable guy to look at. Other than that, though, I mean, do you go with Longoria? Do you go with Forsythe? Do you take a chance on a guy like Souza? I mean, I really just don't know what all these right-handed bats are going to do. I don't think Corey Rasmus is all that great a pitcher, but I also don't think that he's going to be pitching the entire game. So maybe you take some of those guys and hope that they, jump on Rasmus early, and then, they just throw somebody in there and say, here, eat up some innings for us to end this game. I feel like that's probably the way it's going to go, in which case Tampa Bay would be a decent team to look at and target some bats against. But again, the game's in Los Angeles, or Anaheim technically, not really the greatest hitter's ballpark altogether. So I just don't see a ton of upside coming out of here, even though I'm not a big fan of any of the pitchers that they're probably going to be throwing out there. And that brings us to a couple more games to end the day here with some good pitching and some good pitchers' parks. You got Colorado going up against San Francisco. Madison Bumgarner is on the hill. This Colorado team really struggles against left-handed pitching, so I think Bumgarner is a decent option here. The guys that can hit lefties are Story, the shortstop. He's been jacking out home runs against both righties and lefties, but definitely a much better hitter against left-handed pitching. So he's somebody that we got to talk about, definitely a viable option. You got Nolan Arenado, another right-handed bat. I mean, I don't got to tell you guys the numbers on this guy. He's somebody that has a ton of power. Again, he actually hits better in righty-on-righty situations. Bumgarner is a good pitcher, doesn't give up a very high batting average or whip. Doesn't make it easy on opposing teams, but Arenado's somebody else. And then Ryan Rayburn, who's a lefty killer, has been a lefty killer for his entire career. Again, the problem with Rayburn is as soon as Bumgarner comes out, if he comes out in the 7th or 8th inning and they bring in a right-handed reliever, you're probably also going to see them bring in, either Gerardo Parra or Paulson or, whoever they had to sit in order to get Rayburn in the lineup. They're going to bring in one of those lefties to hit against the right-handed relief pitcher. So at best, you're probably only going to get 3 at-bats out of Rayburn here, which kind of makes him a guy I'm not really too excited about. On the other side of this game, you got Chad Bettis pitching for Colorado. And for the last 3 years in limited innings, he's basically been like a reverse splits guy. So I think you are looking for the right-handed bats to go up against them, guys like Posey and Pence. I'm also a big fan of, left-handed bat like Denard Span on top of the order, just smashing some singles for cash games and scoring some runs. I do like Brandon Belt. He's been playing really well. He's really hitting the ball. His problem has always been staying healthy. When he stays healthy, he's definitely a viable option. Has real good numbers against right-handed pitching, and he's actually 7 of 12 lifetime already against Chad Bettis. So, like I said, not a huge sample size, but when a guy is 7 of 12 in a small sample size, it does hold a little bit of weight for me, considering that he profiles well against them too. And then the last game on the day, we got the Mets going up against San Diego. Let me start with Syndergaard. He's an absolute beast. I love Thor. I think this is a great spot for him. I think everybody got burned with DeGrom last night. But if you had DeGrom in your roster last night, which many of us did, I mean, he was 75% owned in tournaments, 90% owned in cash games. All the reasons why you took DeGrom last night are the same reasons why you should be taking Syndergaard tonight. The San Diego team doesn't have a lot of left-handed bats. They've basically sucked this year against right-handed pitching. They strike out a lot. They don't get a lot of hits. They don't score a lot of runs. And Syndergaard's a guy that is a high strikeout pitcher, does limit the other team's batting average, doesn't give up a lot of hits. I mean, it's a perfect matchup. So I know it didn't work out yesterday with DeGrom, but for me, Syndergaard is like clear-cut number one option again here today. When I saw that the Mets were playing San Diego this week and I saw the guys that were on the mound, I'm like, all the Mets pitching. So I'm not going to back off it now just because it didn't work yesterday with DeGrom. I think Syndergaard's in the best spot and is my number one pitcher on the board. Again, make sure you get over to the RotoCurve website. Josh does a great job breaking down all the pitchers. He was a minor league catcher. He's somebody who's caught for a couple guys that have made it into the show. So he really knows what he's talking about when it comes down to pitching. So you probably want to listen to him when it comes to pitching more than you want to listen to me. But like I said, I have no problems going back to Syndergaard today. Even on the other side of this game, Drew Pomeranz has been really good as well. Right-handed bats is probably the way you want to attack him, but this Mets team is very left-handed dominant. They don't have a ton of right-handed bats that they can throw at him. Maybe you get a Wilmer Flores start here instead of Cabrera or Neil Walker up the middle. He's somebody that's okay against left-handed pitching, but not really somebody I'm going to be scared of. Cespedes is actually better in righty-on-righty situations, but again, as a right-handed bat with Pomeranz struggling a little more to righties, he might be a viable option. And then David Wright is the last guy I think we want to look at too. Wright has a 445 WOBA, 250 ISO score, and limited at bats since 2015, because remember, he was hurt for much of last season. But even if you go back 2013, 2012, and even back to when him and Jose Reyes were the left side of the infield for the Mets, he's always hit left-handed pitching well. So I think David Wright is another guy that's in play here today. And that kind of wraps it up. I mean, as you can see, we're a little light on a lot of the big bats that we want to put into our lineups today. And that's because there is so much good pitching on the mound. I mean, there are 7 or 8 guys that I think are, viable options that I'm going to be looking at and trying to break it down. So, just like you guys, I mean, I get a lot of my pitching advice by going over to the DraftKings page, reading Josh's articles, looking through some of the tools that we have available there. So if you're somebody who likes our video, make sure you go over and sign up at the website. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything to sign up for an account. It just makes it easier for us to, track how many people we have coming over and checking things out. And, the other good thing is if you come and sign up for an account, I know we have a free roll tonight going on over at Fantasy Draft. We have free rolls all the time, whether it's at DraftKings or FanDuel, Fantasy Aces, Fantasy Draft. So if you come and sign up for an account, then you can get into some of those free rolls, get yourself some free cash that you can use to help build up your bankroll. So that sums it up for our Benny's Bats section for today. Thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.